3 months ago, my wife, Amy, and I moved to 421 Willow Court. The house was perfect for us, spacious, affordable, and nestled in the quiet suburban Maplewood estates. But little did we know, the house came with a twisted history, one that would lead us headfirst into a nightmare. When we first arrived, the previous owners were long gone, and the house felt like a fresh start. Amy had just gotten promoted to a high-ranking government job, and the timing seemed perfect for a new chapter. But the first week was only peaceful on the surface. That's when Barbara Garcia, the local HOA president, introduced herself. She was everything you'd expect from an HOA president, dressed to the nines, clipboard in hand, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to Maplewood," she greeted us, though it felt more like an inspection. She immediately began pointing out issues with the property, even though we had barely unpacked. But what struck us as odd was her fixation on the previous owners. "This house has a special history," she said, eyes narrowing as she scanned our yard. "The previous owners didn't respect the rules. Let's hope you're different." The next night, Amy dug deeper into the house's history. Turns out, the Andersons, the family that lived here before, had been driven out. Their daughter, Emma, had nearly died during a medical emergency when an ambulance couldn't get through because a car was blocking the driveway. Worse yet, it was Barbara who had filed 12 violations against the Andersons just after the accident, violations for everything from their grass height to the wheelchair ramp they built for Emma. And that's when things started to add up. Barbara had been trying to buy this house for years, but the Andersons refused to sell. Amy's investigation revealed a chilling pattern. Barbara wasn't just an ordinary HOA president. She was a tyrant, weaponizing her position to make life miserable for families. But her power trip wasn't just about enforcing rules. It was about silencing anyone who might expose her. 2 weeks later, the harassment started. Barbara appeared daily, pointing out violations that didn't exist. The smell of something darker was in the air. Amy wasn't just going to let this go, and she started documenting everything: photos, videos, recordings. The harassment was systematic, and Amy was building a case. Then came the day that changed everything. Barbara showed up, this time with Councilman Bradley, an ally from the city council. "You've racked up $1,140 in fines," she said, holding a thick binder filled with photos of our supposed violations. "I'll waive it this time, but next time, we weren't having it." The fines were bogus, and this was clearly an attempt to force us to sell the house. That's when Amy turned the tables. "Bradley," she said coolly, "do you know how Barbara got the funds for all this?" Barbara stammered. But Amy had already pulled out documents showing Barbara's involvement in a multi-million-dollar racket that targeted homeowners to push them out and resell their properties at a profit. Amy was about to destroy Barbara's empire, and she had no idea what was coming next. One night, after Barbara's escalating tactics reached a boiling point, Amy called the cops on Barbara for filing a false police report about us. And that's when the real shock came. Amy didn't just call the cops, she was the cops. As Officer Thompson arrived, he stepped back when he realized who Amy really was, the new chief of police. Not only was she investigating Barbara, but she was also about to expose a federal network of corrupt HOA officials, real estate developers, and city council members. The entire scheme had stolen over $2.4 million from homeowners in the past 5 years. With everything on camera, Amy confronted Barbara, exposing her as the mastermind behind the fraud and the manipulation. "You've been terrorizing this neighborhood for years," Amy said, her voice calm but firm. "It ends now." The moment the news broke, everything changed. Maplewood was no longer under Barbara's control. The community rallied, and Barbara's empire crumbled. Neighbors who had once lived in fear now banded together, and the FBI moved in, seizing evidence and arresting several key players in the corrupt network. But Barbara didn't just go down quietly. She turned to social media, trying to deflect blame by airing the community's dirty laundry. Her actions backfired spectacularly. Instead of finding allies, she exposed herself as the true villain. The neighborhood watched in awe as Barbara's reign of terror unraveled in front of their eyes. Then the unthinkable happened. Barbara, desperate and broken, showed up at her doorstep. "I wanted to see it," she whispered, her eyes filled with remorse. "I wanted to see the neighborhood before I leave." Amy didn't hesitate. "You're violating your restraining order." Barbara's tearful apology did nothing to undo the damage she had caused. She was arrested for a second time and faced a long federal sentence for her crimes. As the investigation expanded, Amy's role as a federal investigator became public. What started as a personal vendetta against an oppressive HOA president turned into a nationwide corruption bust. And as Maplewood began to heal, Amy and I stood by, knowing the fight was far from over. In the end, Barbara's downfall wasn't just about what she had done, it was about the community that stood up to her, the people who refused to let fear and control dictate their lives. It was about humanity over uniformity, connection over control. But Barbara's story didn't end there. Just as the neighborhood began to breathe easier, a shocking twist came to light. Barbara had a daughter, one who had been quietly writing to her from prison, planning her own path in HOA law. The fight wasn't over, and Maplewood had a new enemy to face, Barbara's daughter. And as the sun set on one chapter, the neighborhood braced itself for the next.